Hello and welcome. My name's Ashley from the Motherhood Circle. I'm really happy that you're here today. We had an amazing chat today with my next guest, Orlena. She's a mother of 6 and she shared her really raw and honest true story about her perinatal and postnatal depression story. She went into some real great details about the changes within her partnership with her husband, some of the challenges she had, what she was feeling inside, and how she eventually sought help and was able to bond with her baby daughter after 10 months. There's some really great insights in here, and it's such an important topic to share. So I'm so grateful that Orlena was so raw and generous in sharing her story. If you're feeling like you need support in this area, this is a great video for you to watch. And I've also put some links in the comments in the description as well for you, so you can find the support if you're feeling like you need to talk to somebody for further support. As I always say, snuggle up, grab a cup of tea or coffee and enjoy this episode. And as always, each week there will be a new episode dropping with a completely new topic. So make sure that you subscribe or you sign up to my mailing list so you don't miss out on a single one. Hi, Orlena. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm really excited to have you on, our first real-life mum. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Ashley.
So happy to have you on. Now, Orlena, you have experienced perinatal and postnatal depression. Could you please tell me a little bit about your story on perinatal?
So to tell you a bit about my perinatal depression, I have 6 kids. So I've got 4 girls and 2 boys, as we've sort of covered. So my daughter is my 4th daughter, and she was actually my 6th child that I experienced perinatal depression with. So having recently just had my 5th child, my son, I found out he would have been about 8 weeks old, and I found out I was pregnant again. So with him, I'd had my first cesarean section. So I just experienced my first emergency C-section, still traumatized by that. I was happy. I had 5 kids. I was like, yep, my family's done, so set. And then I found out I was pregnant. And honestly, my world just stopped. I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can't be pregnant right now. My body's still recovering from surgery. I already have 5 kids. What am I going to do? I'm like, I literally haven't even gone back to work, and I'm going to have to tell them that I'm pregnant. And so all of these things are going through my head. And I think emotionally, I was just like, I didn't feel like I had anything left at all to give, really. So literally from finding out that I was pregnant with her, I was just like, I can't do this. And I think for me, it was so hard to actually voice that opinion to anybody, because it was like, you can't complain. And then people are like, but you've already got, blah, blah. So I was already experiencing negative feedback from having my 5th child, and like going to tell people that you're pregnant with a 6th, like, oh, scary. So essentially I realized that, I had a thought of, I want to abort this baby. And I've never had that thought or feeling about any baby. Like, I've always been, I guess, anti-abortion. So for me to actually say that and say it out loud and think that, I knew something wasn't right. And then I found myself not wanting to tell anyone I was pregnant, and I didn't even tell my own mother I was pregnant until I was 5 months pregnant, because I didn't want to have to explain, have that feeling, and then try and explain to them, well, actually, no, I don't want this baby, if you know what I mean.
So you were in a position where you had this brand new baby, you're number 5, then you were newly pregnant with this other baby, and you had so much overwhelm, and you were still recovering from this last birth, and you were afraid of telling people about this new baby because you'd already copped a lot of flack, and all you needed was non-judgment, support, love, a listening ear to listen to you, and you didn't feel safe enough to even communicate to people around you what you were experiencing, or even the fact that you're pregnant and having these thoughts. It sounds like such a challenging and hard time.
You just summarized that perfectly. It was a shocking time. It was just there just was no light at that tunnel, basically.
So heartbreaking for me to hear. Like, I just want to go and give you a big cuddle. It's so heartbreaking. And I imagine that your story is so similar to many women who are experiencing perinatal depression. They feel like they can't reach out and they'll be judged. And, you know, some of the stories that go inside your head at that time also make it more difficult. You're not able to make, you know, more rational, you're not able to rationalize those stories and see which ones are helpful and which ones aren't helpful. So we've talked about your perinatal. You obviously got through it, which is great. But then you went on to have your daughter. You obviously told people. Can you let us know what happened up to your birth and how you processed and got through that and decided to keep her, and then what happened? You ended up having postnatal depression. Can you then tell us what happened there?
Okay, so basically, if you saw me, that was the only way that you knew I was pregnant. Everyone's like, we're expecting and what have you on Facebook and all of that sort of stuff. So pretty much the people I worked with and people I saw on a regular basis are the only ones that knew I was pregnant. And it's funny, we're just saying about Facebook. And then eventually I got to that point. The whole way through, I didn't change my mind on what I was feeling. Like, I still felt that way. And I mean, I've voiced the concerns to my husband, and that caused a little bit of tension there, but we can talk about that later on. But essentially, I just kept that whole feeling till the end. And then I gave birth to her, which ended up being another emergency cesarean. So that wasn't fun.
No.
So on top of that, I had the whole trauma of waiting at the hospital, and then ended up in a C-section where she was literally in the birth canal and they had to pull her back out. So on top of already not wanting to have this baby, I ended up in another traumatic situation again. So she was born, and I put it on Facebook the next day, and to the point where most people are like, "You were pregnant," sort of thing. And I thought, well, yeah. And I got fairly good feedback, but I think, again, having that cesarean section, my mind, my body, none of it just wanted to be a part of it, basically. So at the hospital that I gave birth in, my husband was able to stay with me and overnight. So he ended up staying with me and with her, and essentially he just cared for her, and because I just couldn't and I didn't, I guess, want to. So he, from the get-go, he looked after her, and I found with her being there, I found I shut myself away from them. Like, I didn't interact with her unless I had to. I palmed her off into her father, onto her siblings, and I guess in a way I resented her because I didn't want to have it. I didn't want to be a part of it, essentially. But I didn't do anything about it for a long time. It wasn't until, I think the first time that I sort of started to see any light in the situation was when she was 10 months old and we went to Sydney on our own for a week to go and see my family. And I went and stayed with my sister, who has no kids, so she's the doting aunt. And my mum came with us too. And even then, I sort of was palming her off to them as much as I could. But at the end of the day, I think it was one day where she just sort of went, "No, I don't want them. I just want you." And it was just like, okay, you're actually kind of a cool little kid. And so that was the first time we really sort of got to really sort of bond with each other. But going back to your original question, what helped me is once I sort of hit that phase and I realized that things were so wrong and so bad, like, you shouldn't be going, okay, I like my child when they're nearly one. So I ended up coming home and decided to book in to see my GP, and I have an amazing GP. And I sat down and I spoke to her, and so she did some of the scale testing with me, and we just had a good chat. And she said, "Look, I think you do have postnatal depression." And even when I went for my visits during peri, I didn't say much to her about the perinatal. So this is sort of her chance to sort of really get into it. Um, so we did all the Edinburgh scale and the tools that you do when you have postnatal, and we realised that it was very severe. Like, and she straight away she said, "Look, we need to refer you to a psychologist. Here's a list of A, B, and C. Which one?" So we found one, and basically I started seeing a psychologist when she was a year old. Funnily enough, just before we got on this interview, my psychologist called for a follow-up visit. So still 2 years on, I'm still having the visits, but honestly, I think that just saved us going and getting that help from the GP, and it's so important to have such a good GP.
So you were talking about that you had perinatal support. So did you seek support during your pregnancy as well?
No, I didn't talk to her much about it, but I had a look at a few websites and that sort of thing, and I found the Panda website really good for perinatal. At that stage, I still was very much closed, but once I started talking about the postnatal with my GP, we did get into the perinatal, and I said, "Look, this is what was happening," and she says, "Oh, you were perinatal as well." So
So
it
during
really
that,
helped.
during that process, you were like while you're pregnant, you had found Panda and you were going on there, but you never took the next step to get any support or go talk to your GP. It was only after when she was 10 months old. Was it when she was 10 months old?
Yeah, it was after when she was 10 months old that I went and saw my
Wow.
GP.
And you went through all that all by yourself, no support, no talking to anyone, just everything in your head.
Pretty much everything's just stuck in my head, and it's just
Wow.
like I
Amazing. I'm
felt
so
so
glad you got the help.
cut off. Yeah, me
Support,
too. That's for sure.
finally. So, we were talking a little bit about the bonding with your daughter. So before you started bonding, like, what were you feeling before there was no bond there? And then can you explain a little bit about what it was like when you did finally start to bond and how your relationship sort of changed there?
Yeah. So basically, before we started to bond, I just felt really resentful of her. I still felt like I didn't want you here. I had my perfect little family, and you know, and I think back now and I think, oh, you're a monster. Like I always like think to myself that, and it
That you're
takes a
not,
lot of about
that you're
that.
not.
No, absolutely. And that was one of the great things about getting the support was I learned that I'm not a monster. Um, but once I started bonding with her, and I felt like, I guess you kind of freeze and you feel like you're a bit frozen, and your heart sort of melts and goes, you know what, you're an amazing human. You can do this and you can do that, and no matter what, no matter what I felt, she always still, that your child loves you still. It's unconditional. But once we started to bond, and I could see the beauty in her smile and the cuteness in her laugh and all of that stuff. Before it was just like, ugh, that thing is making noise. Like, like that. As much as, like I said, it's just like it just changes you once you get to a point. I mean, you're not miraculously better, but you get to a point where you go, you know what? I can love you. You deserve to be loved. I deserve to love you. That sort of thing. So that just that melting feeling, I guess. Like it's really true when they say it melts your heart.
They do, don't you? And you just look at them and you're just like, oh my goodness, you're just amazing. Like, you are perfect and divine, and it's amazing.
Exactly.
I can actually relate to your story a little bit. I had birth trauma, and with my first baby, I instantly was bonded with her. And then when I had my second baby, it took it took a little while. I don't even know really, but I remember it was a few months on when I really was like, whoa, like started to have that feeling, and she started to really melt my heart. And before that, I did have a bit of resentment. All I wanted was to sleep, and I was trying to heal from this emergency C-section as well. And all I didn't want, I just wanted to sleep, leave me alone, someone else look after her. And it is really taxing, and you do feel there's something wrong with you. Why are you having these feelings? And I did actually reach out to a few friends and talk to them about it, but it makes you feel really horrible that you can't, you don't have, especially when you've had that experience with other children as well. So,
Yeah.
like what's happened, and you're trying and you try, sometimes it's just a crazy time. And I didn't have PND, and PND is the next level from birth trauma. And actually, so I can just only imagine just how extreme those stories and those thoughts and just what your life was like. And I'm also thinking, like, you mentioned you had conversations when you were pregnant with your husband, and, about you wanting to have an abortion. Can you explain a little bit about what was happening in your relationship and what sort of strains and challenges you're going through?
So I think, well, I know they're not thing, but I pretty much shut down straight away because even my husband agreed we don't need any more. Like we had enough, But unlike him, he flicked the switch straight away. He's like, "Yay, we're gonna have a baby," blah blah. And I said to him, it got to the point where one night I was sitting on the lounge and had my computer out, and I'm exploring all the different options for abortion and that sort of stuff. And I said to him, look, you can do this here and do that there, blah, blah, blah. And he turned and he said to me, if you have an abortion, our marriage is over.
Mm.
So it got to that point. So then I know he meant it in the best way possible, but for me, it was like, that just shut me off completely. And I went, okay, well, that's how you feel. This is how I feel. And I just shut down even more. Um, and I turned around and said to him, look, if you want it, you look after it. So, and that's exactly what I did after she was born. I'm like, you wanted it, you look after her.
Mm.
So, and it honestly did so much damage to us because we were so close, and then it was just this sort of rift, I guess.
Divide.
And exactly.
Mm.
And it was
And
like,
he probably didn't understand even what you were going through. And because he had said that your wall was up and you couldn't have that open communication, and maybe if you'd been able to have that communication there, you could have got that support and that help from someone at that point, if he knew what was going on.
exactly. So we ended up, we still loved each other and that, but there was just this unspoken divide, I guess. And so I felt like even more so that I couldn't just go, hey, blah, 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 I don't feel so great today, or, you know what I mean? Because it'd be like, well, it's kind of, I was the selfish one, I guess,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And then, so he did his best as he could to try and make it positive for me. And, even to the point where, even though she was the sixth child, so there was so much hand me down, like, that is like, oh, why don't you go and get some new baby clothes or this or that. So he was supporting me in his best way that he could, but I was still like, no, no, this isn't what we need.
So I'm assuming that everything's fine with you and your husband now. Is that the case? You've ended up having a conversation, and can you explain what's happening, what happened along the way, and did things
Yeah.
start to change when you got support?
So basically, when we were talking about my trip to Sydney, and I
Mm.
said to him, I don't want to take her. Can't I just leave her here with you? Because he was a stay-at-home dad at the time. And he's like, no, you need to take her. She needs to go and meet, her aunties and what have you. And I practically begged him to keep her at home. And he's like, no, no, no. So I took her down, as we know. So that was kind of his way of going, start there. So that was sort of our turning point where we went, okay, you're going to bond with this baby. So that was his sort of nudge in getting me to try and, I guess, repair bridges for us to sort of become as one little family, because he said to me afterwards that he felt like I just shut him and her out, and he honestly wasn't wrong. So when I came back and I said to him, look, I'm going to go and see the GP because we can't live like this anymore, because it got to the point where we were barely even talking to each other. It was just, I was resenting him because she was born, and he was resenting me because I didn't want her, and then he was looking after her all the time. I didn't want anything to do with her. And it just got to the point where it's just, hey, how you doing? The kids need this. We need that. Blah, blah, blah. Like a grocery list, I guess you could say. Like that's what our relationship became, like a grocery list. And, we started saying things and doing things that just weren't nice to each other, basically. And it just kept, just like a festering sore, it just kept getting infected. And then even after I went and started seeing my psychologist, there was so much damage that just couldn't be undone straight away. And I found that I resented him for all these things. Like some of the stuff probably was so meaningless, and essentially I probably made half of it up in my head. You know what I mean? So it was a really slow process, and it took us, I dare say, pretty much a good 18 months that things were just so bleak with us, and things just kept spiraling. And then it got to the point where I was on really strong antidepressants, and I couldn't take anymore, and I ended up taking too many and had a fun trip in hospital, and it got to the point where it was just that bad that I tried to find my own way out of it, I guess you could say. And so that was where my full breaking point came, and I just went, you know what, this has to stop. And we both were at the stage where it was like there was more toxicity than there was good. So then after my little stay in hospital, I came home, and I was fragile, but I was like, you know what, we can do this. We can build back up. We can build our relationship. We can build the bonds with the kids. And then we went, you know what, it's not worth this. It's not worth the kids not having a mother. It's not worth the pain and anxiety that we're causing each other, that we actually went, you know what, we have to decide, are we going to stay together, or are we going to just go our own way? And we sat down, and it took like 3 days of just talking and more talking and tears, and it got to the point where we were like, you know what, we love each other too much to not give our family the best that we can. And sorry,
You've got me in tears. I'm over here in tears myself.
So that was our turning point, and that was just over about a year ago now. And we realised that because I was working odd hours and then working full time as well, so that pressure was just insane. Sorry. And then we just went, you know what, let's just be. And that's exactly where we got to build ourselves back up again.
And how many years are you now since having your last baby?
So she turns 3 in March.
So it's a long process, isn't it? It's
it is
a long process, and there's a lot to it. It's not just as simple as taking a pill, because you were taking pills, and there was still extra things. So what have you found that's helped you along the way? Is there any resources or techniques or things? Is it a matter of time? Is it a matter of doing all these different things? And how are you feeling today, 3 years post?
It is such a long process. I think, honestly, for myself, I'm still maybe 80% on my journey. It's taken a good 2 years, and like I said before, even now I got a call today to book my next appointment, sort of thing. But oh my god, what was I saying? And I found, like I said before, that looking into Panda, and that is an amazing site and support system. Like, I couldn't recommend it enough. Looking into Panda and having my sessions with my psychologist has been such a good release for me. I found writing as well, like the good old journaling, you just cannot go past it. I found I wrote pages and pages, and sometimes because you can't always speak to somebody else. So sometimes just writing it down and just knowing it's there. And I mean, some of my pages I ripped up and threw in the bin, but just getting that out. And like, I found eventually I talked to my best friend of, well, we've been best friends for 20 years. And even I didn't say anything to her, but she obviously knew everything was wrong. And then it wasn't until I had my breakdown essentially that I said to her, and she's like, you could have just come. And I think that's what we forget. We, as women, we try and do everything ourselves, and we just forget that we're only human too. And, your best friend is your best friend for a reason, So, or just anybody really that you are close to and that you trust, and you go, you know what? Even just saying, hey, I'm not feeling so great today, that helped me. Just go, hey, I'm not feeling so good today. They're like, oh, do you want to talk? Yeah, no. But pretty much those are my techniques. And just trying to be mindful, I guess. Like, just go, you know what? I have a good day today because of A, B, and C. Just, I guess, thinking about it.
Yeah.
But keeping that bad self-talk out, I guess.
I really love mindfulness and gratitude as well. Like you said, thinking about a couple of things. It could be simple, like I'm alive, I have good health, I have a roof over my head. Just simple. It doesn't have to be complex, but just thinking of some really positive things really, can make or break a day, can't it?
It can. It's so good.
Well, thank you so much, Orlena, for sharing your story. It was really, it made me cry so many times throughout there. I was sitting there, some of joy, so much of happiness for you, of where you've come from, and of pain from where you've been. And I'm so happy to sit here today and have this conversation, and you're saying that you're 80% through your journey, and you understand that it is a long journey, but you've got the support system there to support you through this, and you know who to turn to and to talk to now, and you're probably stronger from this experience as well. So thank you so much for being vulnerable and showing your courage and coming on to share with other mothers who, may be sitting at home now experiencing the same things, and can actually, through your story, can go and get that help from Panda or their GP and speak to their friend. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, Ashley.
Thank you. Thanks for watching this episode. Make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, our mailing list, and follow us on our social channels so you never miss an episode. All our details are listed in the description box in YouTube. I look forward to bringing you another great episode next week. Welcome to our circle of support, Mama, with the Motherhood Circle. See you next week. With love, Ashley.